Hey, fellow traveler. Welcome to the Third Eye Awakening podcast, a show where we talk all about spiritual and psychic awakening, magic, the shift from 3D to 5D, star seeds, ascension, multiple timelines, multiple dimensions, the universe, the multiverse, the Akashic records, all the good things. I am your host, Amy Belair, and I'm so glad to have you here with me today. Okay, let's do this. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Third Eye Awakening. Today I have with me Kyle Klutch Chevalier. Do you pronounce it Chevalier?
Yes.
Okay. He's going to talk to us about his experience of being a father, the way that contributes to his spiritual and psychic awakening, his awakening experiences, something he terms Synchromysticism, which I'm very excited to talk about. All kinds of cool things, the fight for our attention, the power of our attention. I love this. So Kyle's nickname is Klutch. He grew up in Canada. He lived in Hawaii for a few years, and now he's based in the Phoenix Valley, the 33rd latitude of all geomance'd places. He's a professional father, content creator, and curious researcher of all things. He also does personal perspective videos on anything from activism to metaphysical perspectives. Hey, Kyle, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction.
That's a great bio. I love that. It's very, I feel like it really touches on like who you really are rather than like some bios, are very professional sounding. That's like, this is me in a nutshell. So
yeah, it's important to get across the essence.
Yeah, it is. So I love that. What kind of things do you create content around?
So my recent projects have been just with my trip on the weekend up north with my daughter. So I flew the drone up, really cool area in Prescott. I'll make a video for her to watch. Then I'll make more professional grade music videos for upcoming artists here in the Valley. I also do commercials for any type of businesses. And I also do activism videos. So whenever there's like a big rally or a conference or something like that, I'll go and I'll create the clutch shots. I'll create an edit, and that's something that's captivating and will get across to people. So that it's like, wow, I didn't know that fact. Oh, or just something. Yeah. So that's the content.
Cool. That's awesome. And so how did you get here to this point in your life where you feel like you're on an awakening journey and you're kind of navigating the universe or the simulation or whatever term resonates with you with some lucidity? And like what got you to this point?
Yeah, so I've really been trying to piece together since I was young, and it started when one of the first moments I had was around the time of my first communion. And that's just how I grew up in a church family. And I remember having this moment, and I just remember looking around and thinking, okay, a lot of people aren't really thinking about this type of stuff. Just conscious, that's just a thought. And I thought, no people are really relating to me on this. So then, years go by and I'm not really into school, but I'm pretty good at school. I like sports. And there was just certain things that people not a lot of people resonated with me with. And then I went to Hawaii and I started doing I was like, man, I'm going to all these beautiful places. I'm hiking. I'm on the beach every morning, every night, looking at these beautiful waves. I'm like, I got to get a camera. So that's when I went out. I got my first Nikon. And at the time, what I was doing was the zoom lens, standing on the beach, planted in with the conductivity of the sand and the water, and I'm sun gazing. But I didn't know anything about sun gazing at the time. But now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I'm looking at that through my 200 zoom lens, right, just piercing me, right into my pineal gland, right into my third eye, right? And I'm doing this all the time. I just loved it. And I'm going to these really strong earth chakra points, going to all the zones. I'm exploring all of Maui, and Maui is like Pandora's box. It's endless. The people who have lived there their entire lives, I'll be taking pictures and they'll be like, where is that? Well, all the locals there are like, well, we can't give away all of our secrets. But now it's like, I got some secrets too. So now I start, they taking me to the surf spots. I'm filming with the GoPro. So I'm learning all of this stuff. Yeah, everything's just unraveling beautifully. And one of the mantras of Maui and Hawaii is that the people who are meant to be there, Hawaii has a way of keeping them there. Other people, it has a way of shedding them away. So I'm coming with this holistic, natural, love nature type vibe. And I was really well accepted there. It was nice. Really, it was just awesome energy. And so now my energy is literally like, I'm starting to stay up for days. I'm hiking, I'm editing, I'm working, and I'm just having this like energetic flow. Like, wow, my diet's changing. I grew up as my dad cooking steaks and all this stuff, just big, heavy meals, right? And now I'm starting to eat super light. I can't even afford the meat there if I wanted to. So I'm going to the farmers markets. I'm eating the healthy produce. Now I'm starting to realize, okay, now my density is literally starting to change. I'm literally like, my thoughts are changing. My energy is getting higher. And that's when my daughter was conceived. And we were living in Makawao, about 3,000 feet elevation. And this place is top 5 best places on the planet to live, rated by National Geographic. Mm. So the rain comes in, hits Haleakala, the 10,000 foot volcano, and then the mist wraps around, and the way the sun hits it, it's just a rainbow all the time. Rainbow mist, just a magical place, beautiful place. But as you can imagine, in Hawaii, the real estate is fluctuating all the time. So we got a beautiful spot, lived in beautiful places, but it's just not really conducive to having a stable foundation, like a stable place to live somebody. And we had offerings to stay in Hawaii, but it was a little bit too fluctuating. So now we're like, okay, do you want to go to Canada with my family? We want to come back. My daughter's mother I'd been with for over 5 years. And we're like, and I'm really cool with her family. So we're like, okay, they had a place here, a home. And we're like, all right, let's go get stable, raise our daughter around family. So we tied up all the loose ends, enjoyed Hawaii to the last minute, came back to Arizona. That's when I started to see things that I've never seen before. It's like a lot changed. That's when I started come back. I started, we're getting everything set up, getting my daughter ready to come, through the portal. She's almost at 9 and a bit months. And I'm still taking photos everywhere. I'm like, look at these beautiful sunsets. I'm looking up at the sky all the time, but I'm just seeing these planes fly, geometrical patterns. Some days, no. Some days there's nothing, blue skies. Then other days, it's literally like grid, the most lines you've ever seen, just on top of each other. So I'm like, I'm into math, I'm into statistics and all this stuff. I'm like, what is the probability of this happening? And I started asking people around, like, are you seeing this? My daughter's mother's dad, do you see this? And so, that's something that I don't know how exactly phrased it, but he put me on the outside. Didn't give me an answer. Now I'm starting to see, every time I drive down the highway, I'm seeing the 5G towers. Every quarter mile, I had no idea what they were, literally. What are these things? They look military. What is going on? So anyway, I had all these questions. Nobody had any answers for me. And it was just like getting back when I was young. This entire time, nobody's really trying to get into these questions with me. But I always had a fascination with the stars, always had a fascination with the way the world works. And it was along the same lines. I'm starting to realize, okay, I got to do my own independent research. I got to start looking, and it's hard, especially with all the way the algorithms are. It's hard to find the terms. It's hard to get on the breadcrumbs. And that's when I started to realize that nobody talks about this type of thing, are very few and far in between. And the people that are, they're kept into their own circles. And, I always knew that there was something going on with medical injections. I always knew that something was going on. So I just said, okay, when my daughter's born, I'm going to be by her side the entire time. Nobody's taking her into another room without me. I'm going to be with her all the time. And so I was, and there was some, coercion to try and get me to go into this. And it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of, because everything's brand new, everything's happening super fast. And so then, as this is all happening at the same time for me, my daughter's mother really was having a lot, like we were living with her parents as our place was getting ready. There was a lot of pressure going on in our relationship. There's a lot going on. So this created some friction between us. And so now I'm here in Arizona, my daughter's being born, there's all these things going on. I'm in a pretty dark place, like in terms of like who I can reach out to, who I can talk to. Nobody's got the information for me. And I'm with her family. And it's different. If it's somebody else's family, you're not blood, you know? So I'm kind of like defending my position more than anything, which is totally understandable. I'm on the outside, so to speak, like, so I think you can feel the amount of anxiety, the darkness that was kind of coming around me. And that's when I had to create space. I had to get out of that place. And I had to come back and I had to reset. And I'm still trying to figure out what's going on in the world. What's going on with the geoengineering, the 5G, medical injections. And I'm trying to explain the little bits and pieces that I know to my daughter's mother, and that I'm just getting the head nod, thinking that I'm reaching her. I'm really not. And so she went behind. I went to the pediatrician's appointments. I showed up. She wouldn't share when the appointments were. I showed up. I brought all my information, the legal notices. I went to the Arizona law. I figured out where I stood in terms of the eyes of the law. Like I did all my research. I had the questions for the doctor. If they were going to go ahead with these medical injections, are you going to sign this paper? Are you going to take liability? Of course not, right? And they called up with their higher ups when they were trying to get my daughter injected. And that's when they said, okay, no, you can't do it. Father's protesting, you can't say no. So I go back, I go to work. I'm thinking, okay, I've shelled this off. I protected my daughter for this time, right? Now I find out that while I'm at work, my daughter was injected. And so I'm totally like, screaming, crying, just so sad. And of course, my daughter had some adverse reactions. She was sweating. So that's when I started to dig into how to detox, how to get rid of these things naturally. Of course, it was coconut water, right? Getting back to Hawaii there, and just starting to get on this, figuring out that the way everything is affecting us comes back to how we create our own auric energetic field. So now I'm starting to research that metaphysical aspect of things, and I'm simultaneously accumulating the knowledge from the dark side and the way the inner workings over here work. And I'm also starting to learn about how to strengthen from the inside out. So now I'm just like staying up all night, researching, figuring things out. It's like one thing after another, super cool synchromysticism happening in my life. I'm learning about astrology. I'm learning about the energetic influences of the luminaries, and things are starting to kind of fall into place for me. My world didn't end, even though it felt like it. I'm still going through it. And now it's like in terms of the simulation, it's like my computer here hit the reset button. Like, oh, it's not working. Did you try turning it off and on again? Well, that's what happened. I got turned off and I was turned on again. So I hit the reset button, and a lot of things started to unfold. So all the the synchromysticism and stuff, there's a lot to go on in there, but I'll get into more of that a little later.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'll let you hop in on a question there.
Yeah, I love everything that you shared. I really feel for you with the betrayal of, I'm sure from her, well, I'm not sure. I'm guessing, offering from her mother's perspective that she really felt that the medical injections are protecting her daughter and felt that you were unreasonably standing in the way, and that was the motivation. But nonetheless, like when you share a child with somebody and you have divergent perspectives on things, and to have your own perspective sort of like dismissed, and to have that level of betrayal is really, really challenging to overcome. So I'm happy for you that you got a reboot, and it's not like, because that kind of betrayal can like get lodged in your psyche, and really, really like dictate everything moving forward. So I'm sorry that happened, but I also think it's really cool that it's almost like your daughter's spirit, as it was like cooking and preparing to come earthside, was sort of like awakening you to the world that she's going to be entering and navigating. It sounds like it was a big activation portal for you, just to be like on the precipice of fatherhood, and that she was really a big part of that.
That's a beautiful perspective, and I appreciate it. That makes a lot of sense as we talk about souls and planning their incarnation, and it reminds me, it resonates with your story, the way things came for you and your activation.
Kids are super activating, super, super, super activating. But I love hearing the way that they activate their fathers too. I think that's just like a perspective that isn't shared enough, in my opinion. So I love hearing that. So where do you want to go from here? I mean, there's so many interesting things to talk about. There's synchromysticism. There's, your perspective on obstacles, the creative hemisphere of our brain. I totally am into that. But also the fight for our attention. I'm really into that too. Like this year was really awakening for me on a whole new level about how powerful our attention is, and how it is like there are so many things set up to hijack our attention for the purposes of creating what they want us to create, rather than creating freely what we could create based on true free will. Yeah. So wherever you want to go, I'm interested in all of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff to unravel there, and to go off the intention and the currency that we pay with our attention, and talking about this being kind of an electrical reality in that sense. So I'll just tie it in with my story and the Synchromysticism. So when I was graduating from university, I went to McMaster University, and I played basketball. I played on the basketball and the football teams there, and always active. And so once I was about to graduate, I had this idea, some influences. I was ready to set across Canada to raise money and awareness about breast cancer. And so on the basketball team, we had we wear the pink shirts with the ribbon, and one of my best friend's mothers was just coming off of the chemotherapy. She was just getting rid of all of her breast cancer. So she was influenced by that. I wrote her name on the back of my jersey, and then it kind of come, and she was really touched by it. I was like, okay, that's a really nice way to reach people. What more can I do? And then it was like, okay, I'm going to ride my bike across Canada. I'm going to go to all the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation locations, and I'm going to create awareness, raise money. That was it. I was going to put bags on my bike. And it was actually this time around, I think it was 2013. And I just went to the Super Bowl party with my dad's work. We're there, we're smoking stogies, we're drinking, we're having a party. My dad and I got a hotel room really close by to the party, and it was a good time. But that night, when that idea hit me, and I couldn't sleep. And I'm like throwing pillows at my dad. I'm like, Dad, I got this idea. I want to, what I just explained to you. And then he's gone, right? So he wakes up, he's an early riser, and we're walking out of the hotel early, like 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, Pop, this is my idea. He's just like, go, okay, do it. Like, he wasn't in the mood for a conversation, but he just said, okay, do it. And I was like, all right, simple. And that was the snowball. Now the snowball is rolling. It's picking up more snow, more momentum. but I was going to do it. That was it. Like, even if it was just me, I was doing it. But now that people really saw, okay, he's really going to do it. It was like, some of my dad's other friends were like, okay, well, they own a car dealership, and they're like, okay, well, your mom's not going to sleep at night. Let's get him a support vehicle. Then the MBA students at McMaster were like, okay, we can hop on this. We can do his marketing. So now we got that on. We got the basketball team. We got the football team. We're picking up momentum. Other friends have a marketing company. They're reaching out to CBC. All this. Now I'm having a sit down meeting with the president of McMaster. They're like, we're going to fund you. They got me the jersey on the back. Other women who are coming out of the breast cancer scene, we're putting their names on the jersey. Like, people are getting involved. It's picking up a lot of momentum, all from this small snowball. And so that's where I met. I was like, who's going to follow me across Canada biking at like 20 miles an hour? Who is going to want to do that? It's going to take me 3 months plus. Who's going to do that? And of course, I did just spend a little bit of time in Arizona for like between semesters of school, training MMA, mixed martial arts. And that's where I met my daughter's mother. And so she was just coming to visit me in Canada for like a couple weeks. Well, she canceled her flight home, and she was my support vehicle driver.
Nice.
So we did this journey, and then I come back, and I'm like, all right. It's like I'm sitting down with some people, and they're like, all right, what do you want to do next? I'm like, I want to go to Hawaii. So I had to get my funds ready. So I went to work for one of my sponsors, worked for him for about 2 years, got all my funds, sent it over to Hawaii. And that's when I started to realize that all the stuff throughout my life and intentions that I've been setting, that was like the most apparent, transparent, obvious thing, that when you set your mind to something, all of these synchromysticisms, things just come together when you really focus on stuff. And now it's like, now I'm having these, like, okay, last year around my birthday, or there's a full moon in Aquarius. I just had my birthday yesterday. I'm an Aquarius sun. Full moon's in Aquarius. My dog, I have an Australian Shepherd, Nala. I bring her outside. I'm living in the foothills of a mountain here, and there's coyotes. So I'm always outside with my dog. I'm looking at stars, it's beautiful dark sky country. I'm staring at the full moon. It's setting in the west. My dog's around, but she's not coming back. Now it's like 40 minutes. Now I'm like, I'm whistling. I'm like, Nala, calling for her. And then it was like the wind started to pick up. It was a dead night. Now I'm starting to feel like the Avatar. The trees are rustling. Everything's kind of like picking up with my momentum. I'm like, I feel like a maestro. I'm like a maestro of the elements right now. And so, as I'm calling for her, I'm doing moon gazing, because I'm thinking, okay, light is information. This information is coming, and I'm decoding it on a subconscious level that I may take days to process. My motherboard up here may take some time, but I'll be getting these downloads. So super clear night. All of a sudden, I see this red light coming from the west. And I'm thinking it's a helicopter. So now this red light, this red orb is coming closer and closer. I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, all right. So I go behind my SUV. I'm kind of behind a tree, because now this white light is coming on like a 45-degree angle. And that light is kind of like right where I'm going to be standing. I'm like, I'm going to get lit up in this. They're going to see me, So I'm just kind of checking it out behind. And then all of a sudden, that white light from the red orb shoots into a particle beam. It materializes, and it cuts the moon in half, so to speak, like a smoke screen. So now I can't see the moon.
Wow.
And the moon's setting. And I'm thinking that this red orb is like, maybe 150 yards away, like in my neighbor's yard. So now my mind's going crazy. What just happened? But at the same time, the red orb shoots off over top of the mountain that's right behind me. And I'm living on the 33rd.3 degree latitude. That's exactly where my house is located. And And I'm like, did my dog just get abducted? I'm still looking at the moon. And now the moon sets below it. I can't get my downloads anymore. Right at the precipice, right when the moon is setting. Can't see it. Right on the horizon. A few moments later, Nala comes back home. And I'm like totally flabbergasted. Nobody's awake. It's like 2:30 in the morning, right? Or like super late at night. And like nobody's home. Nobody to talk to. I ended up talking to some friends in Israel. But that whole moment there and the dimensionality of it didn't make any sense in terms of like logical thinking, you know?
Yeah.
Because the way the smoke screen, it initially looked like it was about 150 yards away, but then the smoke screen turned into like a chem cloud that was actually out in the distance. So it wasn't close.
Wow.
And then that red orb shot over the mountain, but you know, all of this stuff just wasn't adding up. So that's where I'm like, okay, what is the fabric of reality? And I don't know. I'm just sharing an experience of mine, but it opens up a lot in your mind, right?
Yeah, for sure. I remember seeing, it kind of reminds me of something I saw on Instagram. It was footage of the sun setting between two clouds. It was very clear. It was like, it didn't look doctored to me at all. And I was like, I don't have an explanation for this, but I am mind blown. It definitely makes me question things even more deeply. So do you think you know, or do you have any speculation as to what that was all about?
So that ties in. Okay, so what I term is call it the 4D radar. And why I call it the 4D radar is because whenever you start to pop up on 4D, like your higher self, then you become exposed to the higher frequency beings, you know. But I think that 5D, the way that everything's going, is like 5D is like you got to be anchored in love. So no like nefarious 4D beings can breach that 5D base. Like they can't get in there, right? But as soon as you pop up on 4D, they want to keep you trapped down into 3D. That's where they, you know, so we have these fourth dimensional beings that kind of maybe operate outside of the space-time continuum that our 3D logos mind is trapped in. And so here's a few cases that make that case. Here's my evidence I'm putting on.
Okay.
So in Africa, these archaeologists find these really cool rocks, these powerful stones, and they're going to fly them back to the US. They get on the plane, and all of a sudden, they didn't go through any of the TSA or anything like that. Now, a whole bunch of guys in black suits pop up on the plane. They know exactly the bag, and they come and take those stones out of the bag. So there's one case. The other one is when I was in Hawaii, some of my hiking friends were out in these amazingly powerful areas. They find this old ancient arrowhead, and it's like super powerful, like the colors, I'm pretty sure it was like an emerald color. And so now they're starting to get in connection with like National Geographic. They send out a columnist to write an article on it. And then then there's bidders, people want to buy it off of them. Then the FBI comes, boom, takes the rock away, takes the arrowhead or whatever it was away, says you're not writing an article about it, you're not buying it, and you're not talking about it ever again.
Wow.
That was done. Now I'm doing my activism and I'm making all these videos. And now I'm starting to find out about all these crazy things, you know, Morgellons and the nanofibers, and I'm researching. I'm getting together with like world-class researchers that are putting on events here in Tucson. And I'm trying to present this information because I have people in my life that are affected by it, old teammates. So I'm creating these videos. One of the videos I make goes viral, like overnight, like it was like millions of views, and it's just being shared everywhere. And so that's when I was like, okay, it was like a minute-long video, and then it got flagged. And that's when the Alphabet Boys came to my house and knocked on my door and started telling me that I'm, a domestic terrorist type thing. And I'm like, what the hell? And nobody else would have believed me. Luckily, I had a roommate that's there as these agents are at my door, pulling up in their, you know, $70,000, $100,000 undercover cars, talking to me. You know, we just want to make sure that you're not some, you know, Timothy McVeigh. Like, what the fuck? And so they go and ask the people who I live with. They're like, no, he feeds the horses every morning. He's like, he writes poetry. He's like, he's a super nice guy. You know, he's just dedicated to his daughter. No, you don't got to worry about him. So that all went away. But I continued making these videos. It got to the point where I'm making these videos, I'm about to render them, and I'd have helicopters fly over my house. I'm living in a rural area. I'd be like, hey, Andre, I'd be like, look it, man, about to render this video. I bet you there's gonna be a helicopter. I was like 5 for 5. That's when I started to realize that I was getting in contact with other people too that are having like similar things, you know, like popping up on the 4D radar, and then you have these things that come to shut you down. You know,
that's so interesting.
In a whole bunch of and yeah, and so to me, just as I talked about kind of like the nefarious side of things, it's also the same on the synchromysticism side of things, where like the synchronicities pop into place and we have the higher frequency. Everything is working outside of our visible light spectrum, out of these third dimensional senses. But we have the outside of this, everything is working to play through people, places, and things in our environment to present us with the manifestations.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So I completely, I mean, in my own experience, I found the same thing, that like, I just never heard the term synchromysticism, but basically as our consciousness rises, it's like the simulation reaches out to wink at us, or like be like, hey, I'm interacting with you, like I'm directly connected to your consciousness. This is a responsive program. But I also totally, like, I think it's so interesting that you have these cases for evidence, and you also have your own experience of being like a little bit too outspoken about things they don't want anyone talking about, because I've been suspecting that for a long time, but I haven't had those experiences myself. But that's kind of just what I like find and makes sense to me, is like people, we're not, there's definitely somebody that does not, or and like a group of somebodies that do not desire for us to get to that 5D consciousness where we're anchored in love, and as we approach it, they would like to shut it down. But it's still also like, part of my brain is like, it's still also just another aspect of the simulation too, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But recently I've been sort of low-key censored on Instagram, like flagged and kind of low-key censored. So when I've done IGTV interviews for other people's channels, they get taken down. And I'm not talking about conspiracy stuff. I'm just talking about how powerful we are and that we're all psychic, and they get taken away. And I'm like, oh, it's almost like they don't want us to know about that.
Absolutely. Anything that's going to question what we've been told, it doesn't matter if it's conspiratorium or it's your innate powers, whatever it's going to question or cause a ripple. And so that plays into the idea of, I was talking about the metaphor of sports rivals. You know, you watch these great like TSN, ESPN, 30 for 30 documentaries, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and they're telling you about their greatest games, and they got to play against the greatest competitors. So now it's like we've been immersed into this, you know, Roman Colosseum, so to speak, and now we're fighting off these different spirits, you know, you call them whatever you want, you know, Jezebel spirits, various spirits, demons, all the whole shebang, and we're dealing with these things that have hijacked us from a young age, got into us. Now we have to deprogram those. Like some of them are literal programs like AI consciousness. Some of them are just the Scientology, left logic brain. That's it. All of these different things that our higher self is now like, got to get that stuff out to get all of the source power in. And then the stronger that we are, the less we're hijacked, the less parasites and more conscious awareness that we have running through our body, there's no room for that. There's no way that any of those lower beings can even operate within us or around us.
Totally. And yet I really appreciate that analogy you've drawn between like our competitors or the rivals or opponents being like an opportunity, offering us the opportunity to rise into that. I really like that because I can't really reconcile my brain with sitting around being in a perpetually victimized state because of the, the negative things that are influencing us and like the negative agendas and stuff. Like I acknowledge that they're there and I continue learning more about them. But I also don't want to stay in a place where I feel like, oh, we're all fucked because, the powers that be and the elites and the cabal and all that stuff. And so my brain is always trying to reconcile because to me, we are all of the same consciousness. Everything is the same consciousness expressing itself. But I really like the way that you put it. It's like, not in a way that's condoning anybody else's harmful behavior or harmful motivations, but sort of like, that's just part of this particular zone in the game. That's part of the challenge. It's part of the evolution that is made available to us, is to be in an environment of polarity and exercise our free will, but also have our free will kind of manipulated so that we're given the opportunity to learn more about where the power truly lies, and it truly lies within us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wrote a speech, sport is like life is like sport. My dad being a big sports head back in grade 5 or grade 6. And now that that analogy is still prevalent today. And that helps me, because when I get triggered by something, I'm trying to rewire myself to have, okay, that's really annoying you. Just breathe. Remind you to breathe. Just focus on your breath. Okay, every time I get triggered, focus on my breath. Well, now if I'm dealing with my daughter's mother or some type of force that's really trying to mess with me and my state of being, it's next to impossible, but I'm working on it, because even impossible says I'm possible. So I'm starting to set the trigger feedback loop where, hey, thanks for being my arch nemesis, my greatest rival, because you're going to make me better. I'm going to really learn self-control. I'm really going to learn how to articulate myself. That's another piece of wisdom my dad passed on to me. He said, never write a text, never send anything out unless you're okay with it being up on the front page of the newspaper the next day.
Oh, that's good.
That'll make you take a step back. That'll make sure that you're well calculated and calibrated before you put anything out there.
That's good wisdom. Yeah. Oh, I really, really like that. I really like that a lot. I'm going to carry that forward for sure. Just that feeling of like appreciating our rivals or our opponents or whatever, because I see it in Akashic readings all the time, especially going into past life things where I'm just like, oh, this was the benefit of that dynamic. And like, you couldn't experience it on the deep embodied level without, like, if it was just a thought exercise, it doesn't have the same impact as when you live through it and you're triggered and you feel the feelings, and the whole thing offers you a choice of how you want to react, how you want to present yourself. And through the whole process, you become alchemized into a new version of yourself. And sometimes we just have to be paired up with people or consciousnesses or events that sort of rub us kind of raw in certain places so that we can, create a new barrier, a new version of ourselves.
Yeah, keep pushing that conscious evolution forward, just like it makes the sports better because you have the best playing in the championship finals. Everything's out here to ride. I think that ties in with, if we are into the age of air, we are in the age of Aquarius, and the thoughts and everything is starting to materialize faster in the third dimension. We really have to be on top of what we think.
Definitely.
Because if it's going to materialize faster, you can't have one bad thought, like you don't want to be thinking that, you don't want to let anything in. But just to go back to the 4D and that operating outside of the visual senses, maybe you can answer a question about what that's like for you once you started to unlock your activation.
Sure.
And because, you know, I heard you describe it. Some people describe it as the library. You felt it was more like a blueprint. So what, like, whoa, what is all that to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, we experience it subjectively, just like we do everything else. So everybody's experience is going to be different. But I love sort of demystifying it because I got lost in the ways it was mystified and sort of inadvertently exaggerated for a long time. And so I guess the way that I experience it is through, like, are you asking how the information comes through to me, or like what it feels like or seems like or how it presents itself? Is that what the question is?
Yeah. So is it audio visual? Is
Okay.
it a
Yeah.
sensory thing? Is it something that comes into your mind and you formulate, or is it like a thought that just comes to your, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I love this question. So for me, my primary gift is claircognizance. For a long time, I thought it was clairvoyance because I'm very visual, have a very vivid imagination. I visualize easily, and I'm a visual artist. But claircognizance is the first one. And so it just comes in as a completed, like a complete thought, a complete download, and I just know it. So I just know an answer. Kind of a low key example from my past before I had really harnessed it was I was watching this show once, and it was like one of those, like, oh, I was haunted, the story of my haunted house kind of shows. And the woman was talking about how there was this spirit of a little boy that was haunting her house. And the boy would always refer to this guy that he called man. And at first she thought it was a little boy that needed help. Then one time he presented himself as this horrible, scary man, and she thought it was an evil spirit that was disguising itself as a little boy to lure her in. And she got somebody to come in and clear her house and all that stuff. I knew when I was watching that no, it was a little boy. He was murdered. He was showing, like, they knew that he was murdered because he had lived in that house. He was showing them the last person he saw, and that's who he was referring to as man. He was like 3 or 4, this little spirit. And so I just knew what the answer was. And that's claircognizance. You just know something, and you can't really explain how you know it, but you also can't be talked out of it. But then it filters through
Right.
my mind's eye and it turns into pictures. And that's so when I'm seeing people's past lives, I'm seeing like their physical form, what they're wearing, where they are. Sometimes it'll move into other senses where in my, it's still kind of in my imagination, but like I can smell things. Like I can smell the smell of blood, or I can smell, how stinky life used to be before, in the before times. Life smelled awful. There was poo
Yeah.
everywhere. uh so, but I would say like it's seldom for me presents as auditory. It's more of those two where it's like coming through my crown as a knowing, and then it explains itself through a picture.
That makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me of a book I read. It's called Born on a Blue Day, and it's about autistic savants. So they're not able to necessarily socially interact like normally. The individual that wrote the book actually was able to, but these are the real life Rain Man. And so they had a variety of different cases they presented in the book. One of them was a set of twins, and they were able to, they'd say, okay, what day of the week was August 4th, 1947? And they'd say, it was a Wednesday and it was rainy day. And then the people would be like, actually, it was a Thursday. And then the twins would be like, no, you didn't calculate the leap year. And then they'd be like, oh my God, it's right. It was a Wednesday. And then they look in the almanac and it was a rainy day. Like thing, like this sense of knowing. So it to me. And then there's like Pharrell, who's the rap artist, and the name escapes me, but basically this is when music, you see music in your mind instead of hearing it. You see different colors. And that's another aspect of the book. These people who, like the guy who's writing the book, explains how he gets mathematical answers, and it'll literally be two shapes that come together. You can multiply 11,575 times 247, and this will come together like a jigsaw puzzle, match up, and then all of a sudden this will crystallize, that number will come up, and there's your answer. And he's right, you know. So it's all these ways that we've never been explained on how things, our minds interpret things and work. And to me, everything, all the technology is based off of the human capabilities, the telephone, telepathy, you know, being able to know all these things absolutely makes sense for your activation.
100%. I always think that about, you know, like people who are really, really rooted in the left brain and science as like irrefutable proof of, you know, nothing meaning anything. I always think like, yeah, but all of our instruments are extensions of our five senses. So they just extend what we can perceive through our five senses. But there's still all that information that doesn't translate to our five senses, that we're still not perceiving. And we can't, like, it's just not meant for those senses, and it's not meant for those instruments. We receive it through our psychic centers. To me, it's just stuff that can't interact with us electrochemically because it hasn't, the vibration of the pattern hasn't slowed down into 3D yet. It's still kind of in the higher dimensions. And so we perceive it through our subtler senses.
Yeah, this agnostic Scientology, they know all about orgone energy. They know all about the atmospheric information that we're able to tap into if we tune our radio just a little bit. It's like when there's a new invention about to hit the world, there'll be 7 different scientists simultaneously working on it around the planet, never talk to each other, but they're all about to release this groundbreaking invention.
Yeah.
How do they do it? It's because it's now the energetic influences are here, and with the Saturn Jupiter grand conjunction that just happened, boom, that energy is now here. Manifestation period. They want us all in our houses scared so that we can't tap into this energy. They took the Nikola, like here where they're doing us manufactured drought with all the geoengineering. We had experiments out here where we were creating a forest or a garden area, agricultural zone in the desert, Wilhelm Reich. And what happened? The black helicopter showed up and shut down, tapping into the orgone energy. Anything they can do to keep us in this third dimensional agnostic, there's only physicality state of mind.
Yeah.
They'll do it. Yeah,
exactly. And so like when you're only tapping into what you can perceive through your five senses and assuming that that's all that's real, what happens is you just regurgitate the same manifestations over and over and over because that's all you're paying your attention to. Whereas the higher potentials of creation come from that which is non-physically expressed yet, you know, like it comes from like, it's non-physical. It hasn't slowed down into manifestation, but it nonetheless exists. And that's how, like, our imagination is such a sacred tool and our heart is such a sacred tool. And when we receive something through the purity of our imagination and it activates a beautiful feeling in our heart, that's where real potential comes from. But if we're always focused on what is just currently manifested as being the only thing that's real, then we just keep regurgitating it. And when they feed us imagery and subliminal messages through audio, they influence the direction that we manifest. So collectively, we're rendering a consensus reality that matches what they desire for us to produce.
Yes, all of that dark black magic, so that they can continue their greed, their power, feed into that. And then that's just like, it's got to be growing, like it's got to be getting smaller and smaller because it's just so limited as opposed to the infinite of expansion of consciousness and new experiences.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's for sure like shrinking, like it's just losing its power because it requires a food source in order to keep going. And we just keep waking up more and more and more. And sort of like, even when we're only semi-awakened, we're still awakened more than we were before, where we're, you know, just questioning things more, we're just moving more into a direction of self-acceptance, self-love. People are trying to heal themselves. They're trying to decondition from all the crap that they've picked up along the way. And so it's that dark sort of greed-based operating system is losing its food source, its energy source, I think.
Yeah, and so, you know, they refer to the people that are closed-minded from their higher senses. They've been castrated from their third eye, and they're stuck in this third dimensional sense. You know, they refer to them as goyim, the herd, the animal state of mind, lower center. Well, what they're doing is just they're setting the mental traps, just like you would, you know, like behind me, that labyrinth. Keep going through the labyrinth, just like you feed the livestock through back and forth. Well, they're doing this mental gymnastics for people. Now, 3 years ago, I was telling my daughter's mother, I'm like, look, what they want to do is they want to make robots, basically. They want you to be, and now, oh, yo, you're fucking crazy, you conspiracy nut. Oh my God, you need to be checked out. Okay, fast forward 3 years. Who's the guy? Elon Musk. Well, let's put a Neuralink transmitter in your brain. Yes. Oh, and then you got, you know, ball Gates over here. Let's upload a Microsoft software to your organic motherboard. Let's, you know what I mean? Like,
yes,
we want to put the VR headset on you. We want to make we want your work. We want you to work from your computer, have fun in your computer. We want you to have a robotic girlfriend. We want you to have all these artificial things. We're going to give it all to you. And you know what? People are just going to keep going, little bit by little bit. And you know, if we're talking about this crystal technology right between our heads. Well, oh man, AirPods are so cool. You know, so, look at me, I got my AirPods on. Well, what's going on here? You have a subliminal frequency that's, you know, just like all the other frequencies right here. I just spent the weekend up in the trees listening to the absolute silence, no self-service. That's a totally different download than the energetic frequency blanket that we have over top of inside the cities.
For sure. That's totally what I see too, is like they're creating an artificial matrix that overlays the natural organic matrix. And they're doing such a good job at boiling the frog that we don't notice. Yeah. And they give us a payoff in exchange, right? Like our entertainment and you know, like little pleasures that we can kind of afford, but we feel like badasses, like AirPods, you know, like you feel like, oh yeah, I've got my AirPods when you finally get them. Which I don't have them yet, so just saying. But yeah. You know, like it's like a thing to aspire to that feels like a treat when you get it for yourself, and makes you feel like you have the best of the best or whatever. And it's this little dopamine hit, and you get entertained through it, but it is contributing to an artificial matrix overlay that distracts you from the true organic matrix that we're actually inherently a part of, where all of the real magic exists and all of the real codes. Like we're so powerfully encoded with nature. I've just been noticing that myself with certain plants over the last year or two, like visually the way that they're arranged does something in my brain that I can't quite articulate, but it brings it into like really intense alignment, as well as all the beautiful aerosols and the quality of air when you're, you know, in the trees and away from pollution. Like whenever you spend time out in nature, it legitimately rewires you back to what your true potential is. But you know, we're supposed to stay inside right now because there's a pandemic.
Yeah, I know. And if that doesn't put a light bulb off in your head that you're not allowed to go out into the trees in the forest alone, no. And if you are, you better be wearing a mask. If that does not trigger something in you, I don't know what to do. I really want to help you, but I don't know if I can, because that's pretty deep programming right there.
It is. The forests are closed for your own safety. You can't go be in nature.
Yeah, everything's for your safety.
Yeah, we definitely have your best interest at heart, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us just inject you with these. Yeah.
It's wild, eh? It's really wild. Like, I remember hearing about the Neuralink thing and just being like, oh, oh, because I didn't know 3 years ago, I didn't know that they were moving us towards sort of like an AI agenda. That was a big eye opener for me this year. Like, I've always known that we were being manipulated, but I just didn't, there were limitations to my observation of it. Like, I stopped listening to the news probably like 5 years ago. I really, really curated the media that I was taking in. And so it kind of created this like bubble of ignorance for me that this year was kind of blown wide open because, or in 2020 was blown wide open. And yeah, I remember hearing the interview about Neuralink and just being like, oh my God, the end game is so much more intense than I realized.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to tie it back in with the opposite side of the things, talking about rivals and everything, it's like, okay, so I was kind of put into a fear state, right? I was kind of intimidated by the agents coming to my door and the helicopters over my house. And then it was like, and like for me, like loving sports and being a competitive guy, coming from a competitive father and being an alpha male, just wanting to like you can't stop me. That's like, it's always been my thing, right? Like nothing. So now it's like, it's a mental game, right? Because now am I either going to stop making videos? Am I going to stop talking? Am I just going to go back into my little hole and just, live my quaint little quiet life and hope that I stay off the radar, or is it like, am I going to blow this thing wide open? And that's when I started to be like, okay, like fully go into love, fully go into the heart space. And then the synchromysticism hit with the analogy that came. And I heard this analogy and it really resonated with me. It's like, they even tell you, and this kind of goes in with the Avatar. If you ever watched the show, The Avatar, great childhood segment where they explain the 7 chakra centers. Even that can be considered an indoctrination of sorts, because consider your energetic flow like a waterfall, right? And you want to get a drink out of the waterfall. You want to like be a little parasite off that waterfall. You want to just siphon some for yourself, right? Well, if you slow down that energetic flow to these 7 different pools, now you can take a drink from it. But once you condense everything and put it in the heart, and now you have like Niagara Falls, you got the big whirlpool. There's so much energy right there. You try and get a drink from that, you're going to get sucked in, or you're going to get spit out. You can't get a drink. You can't, you know what I mean? That's the heart space. That's the Niagara Falls. That's where everything comes together. That's the foundation of, the new age talk of 5D to me.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I was like, dang, okay, let's just get into the heart. And, it's easy to fall back down and have to deal with the, the third dimensional lower side of things. And that's when it's like, okay, let's bring it back up. Let's get into those.
Yeah, it
that
is.
Trigger response.
It is really easy to fall back into like, basically, I feel like in 3D, we are resting in our mind space. That's where we operate out of. And the mind is really powerful. But if it's your primary sort of like operation base, then it's just very limited as well in its function. And I try to make no illusions that I am also still sucked back up into my mind pretty frequently during the day. And I have to like diligently be self-aware and bring it back into my heart, even though I was like born with a wide open heart center. Well, we all are, but like it's one of my superpowers, I think, is that I have a wide open heart center. But still, it's not normal for us anymore. We're not conditioned to hang out in our heart. We tend to hang out in our mind, and it takes discipline to return to the heart, which is also why I think like, so I'm kind of doing the preliminary mental work to create a program about like activating our psychic centers through the chakras. And I think I'm going to start with the heart. Like for anybody who buys the whole package, like you have to start with the heart, not the crown, not the root, the heart, because the heart is where our real power is. It's what connects us into like 5D, which is like the mini toroidal field, and it brings you into like the 0 point probability, frequency where everything can be created from. But it's challenging. It's not. I think kids, like, you might find
Yeah,
this with your daughter. I definitely find that my son is way more, my 16-year-old, he's way more like heart rooted. Even though he's a very intellectual person, he's very heart rooted. I think the newer kids that come in are more primed for operating from the heart.
yeah, absolutely. It's the foundation, and to make the heart mind metaphysical connection, what I've implanted in my mind was the programming that there is more than the 3D. So whatever happens to this, my consciousness and my etheric body, my consciousness is still going to go on. So it doesn't matter. That's what helps me shed my fear of anything happening to me here, because I know there's more to it. And that's why that's what makes the focal point on expanding your, like, training your attention, your mind. It makes it that much more of a focal point, because this is our time, our chance to build those, mental muscles, build that program, so that when we do return to our creator space, our focus is ninja like sensei,
Yeah, super disciplined, super clear and honed. Yeah, I love that. Kyle Klutch Chevalier, this has been an excellent conversation. I feel like I could talk with you so much longer, but luckily I am going to, because we have a session coming up in just a few minutes.
Yes.
So otherwise, I would probably keep talking to you for the purpose of the podcast. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences and your perspective, and the way that this awakening was catalyzed through the initiation into fatherhood, and what you've done with it since then. I find it super fascinating.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks for being part of my synchro-mystic journey. And I'm really excited about our holographic multidimensional re-patterning session that's coming up and tapping into the Akashic records. I'm like, that was my birthday gift to myself, and I'm so excited to get into it with you. So thank you.
Yeah, I love those ones. I'm excited to do it too. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. You know how it goes. If you listen to this and you enjoyed it and you want to give us some love back, then take a screenshot of yourself listening and tag Kyle and myself in the, and post it to your social media. All of his stuff is in the show notes. But otherwise, thank you for being with us for this episode. Your attention is truly, truly valued and appreciated. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you so much for being here with me on this episode. I appreciate you more than my words could ever say. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, and share, and I will catch you on the next episode.